All right, part one successful. I didn't trip with the glass of water. Nice. The first time I spoke at ABNY, I didn't bring any water up here. By the time I was done, it was hard to even get a word out, but I guess you learn from experience. So today, 3 years ago, I was officially sworn in at Police Plaza. I was unofficially sworn in the Friday before on the 16th, and the Chelsea bombing was on the 17th. So right before the 19th, which was the official ceremony, I asked John Miller, hey John, could you do something for me? Could you please make sure that we get Rahimi before this ceremony ends? Because we have a press conference right after this. And lo and behold, in the middle of the ceremony, I get a note handed to me that the Linden Police Department had apprehended Rahimi after a shootout. So that's why John Miller still has his job, amongst other reasons. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that great introduction. And a warm greeting from ABNY. I can't believe it's a year and a half since I've spoken here, but I guess I have to believe you. Thank you for everything that ABNY does for the city. You make it a better place. So over the past 3 years that I've been police commissioner, and I still find that hard to believe, sometimes it feels like 30 years, sometimes it just feels like 3 weeks, but I guess that's the nature of the position. One of my main goals has to make sure that the NYPD is more open and accessible to the public and to foster even greater collaboration and partnership between the police and all the communities that we serve. That's the way forward. There's no doubt about that. We are at record lows for crime, although you might not necessarily know that reading some newspapers, that you might think that the city's falling apart. I'm going to walk you through where we actually are. That's certainly not the case. In my experience, the single most important ingredient in keeping the city safe is to make sure that the people of the city trust the NYPD. And this is where we are in 2019. And the transformation of the last few decades has been nothing short of miraculous. Being safe, and just as important, feeling safe, are absolutely vital to the health of our city and to our nation. The 74th session of the UN General Assembly kicked off this week, and the first day of the high-level general debate is on Tuesday, the day President Trump is scheduled to address the gathering. As we do every year, the NYPD uses many thousands of police officers to safeguard the entire two-week event and to help maintain a sense of normalcy for New York City. But if you've been in New York City during the last 2 weeks of September, you might not believe that's true. We're hosting heads of state and diplomats from 193 nations, the largest gathering of world leaders, and it's all right here in New York City. A couple of thousand NYPD vehicles are part of the 200 or so escort convoys that will drive the rest of you absolutely crazy for a couple of weeks. And of course, personnel and expertise from our many great law enforcement partners at the federal level will be out there too, especially the Secret Service, people with whom we work so well in many areas. And while all this is going on, the city continues. Our hardworking cops still have the daily business of 911 and 311 calls to answer, to the tune of about 400,000 calls a month. And I can tell you, no other city on earth has made more of an investment in keeping the public and its cops safe. The results of this work are well documented. By reducing overall crime by more than 78% in the past 25 years, by reducing murders by more than 85%, we are serving people better, using enforcement more intelligently, and repairing and strengthening relationships inside and outside the department. Thanks at least in part to our greater public safety, record numbers of tourists are flooding our streets, restaurants, parks, and Broadway shows. I thought it was 60 million, but I was corrected this morning after a discussion that 67 million tourists come into New York City every year. Construction cranes are everywhere, and massive real estate investment has tracked the pathways of public safety from Manhattan to the other boroughs. What does that have to do with the NYPD? Well, growth like this happens when people are safe, and when they feel safe too. This is truly an important time for New York City. We're heading in the right direction. So let's talk this morning about the facts, about how we can continue to improve in our record-setting reductions on crime. Over the past 5 years, violent crime has seen its steepest decline since the mid-1990s. As part of that, NYPD cops have seized about 28,000 illegally possessed firearms, including many large stashes from interstate gun traffickers. I can tell you that our police continue to do their jobs better than any other police department in the world, and they're doing it better than ever right now. There are some people and some groups, though, that would have you believe otherwise. I will be honest. I really don't understand their end game. highlighting every incident on social media, trying to sow seeds of doubt in the minds of New Yorkers, trying to convince you that crime is out of control and that your police are afraid to do their jobs. That's insulting. It's insulting to your intelligence. It's insulting to me, too. But most of all, it's insulting to all 55,000 members of the New York City Police Department. And it especially denigrates the courageous work of the 36,000 men and women who put on that uniform each and every day and who wear that shield every single day, all in service to New Yorkers. Earlier this week, on Tuesday, we had 4 patrol cops from the 120 precinct in Staten Island confront a man they knew had a history of violence. He was wanted for committing a domestic assault the day before, and the complainant called the police, and they responded, and she said that she just saw him walking through the neighborhood. These brave officers did their job. They moved in to make the arrest, and he violently resisted. They tasered him, but to no avail. And then he pulled out a gun. The officers grabbed his arms and forced the muzzle of the firearm away from everyone, including innocent bystanders. The man was still able to fire his weapon twice, prompting an officer to return fire, killing him. In the exchange of gunfire, a 30-year-old police officer with just 3.5 years on the job was shot through her hand. The suspect was a 39-year-old man with multiple prior arrests, mainly for assault and weapons charges. He had previously been convicted of another shooting in Staten Island, for which he served 5 years in prison. Clearly, he didn't want to go back to jail this week. Our officer, thankfully, is recovering from surgery on her hand and was released from the hospital yesterday. She's a police officer with a family that loves her. She didn't have to do this job. No one made her. She didn't have to become a cop. She wanted to. She made the decision to become a New York City police officer for the same reason most of us do. She wanted to make a difference in the lives of New Yorkers. She's doing exactly that every day. So it really, really disturbs me when anyone questions the motivation or drive or fortitude of the men and women of this great police department. Some claim it was a better time in New York City a decade ago, a time when cops were cops and leaders were leaders, and New Yorkers didn't have to barricade themselves inside their homes, petrified of criminals running rampant. Nothing could be further from the truth in 2019 as we approach 2020. Let's do some comparisons. In 2010, there were 241 more murders than there were last year. In 2010, there were 719 more shootings. In 2010, there were 7,600 more robberies, 7,000 more burglaries, and nearly 5,000 more auto thefts. But what about 2019? Through last weekend, overall crime was down another 3.1% citywide. It's about 2,100 crimes. Now, those are statistics, but those are people, too. Those are 2,100 less victims. That includes a 3% drop in homicide and a nearly 12% drop in burglaries. As of this morning, however, we're up 35 shooting incidents from last year. Shootings and homicides in New York City are disproportionately fueled by gang and crew violence. There's no denying that we're experiencing a spike there. But between our patrol cops, our detectives, and our specialized units, we're working tirelessly every day to address the hot spots. Around the clock, 24 hours a day, I get real-time information about every shooting, every murder, every bank robbery in our city. I'm intimately aware of all the ups and downs and all the details of what's affecting our overall crime rate. I also see the trends beyond a single day, a single weekend, or a single month. Spikes happen from time to time which make headlines. But I can tell you that even being up in shootings, which is a very serious thing, that does not, on its own, reverse the very positive trends that we're seeing. I remember a time, and most of you probably do too, when our city averaged about 6 murders every single day. This year, we've averaged less than 1 homicide a day across the 5 boroughs in a city of 8.6 million people. That's a rate of about 3.4 per 100,000. If you have the opportunity today, go on your phone, Google some other major cities, and see what their murder rate is. In all of 1990, New York City saw 2,245 murders. Just think about where we'd be if that figure had gone unbridled for the next 3 decades. In the ballpark of 30,000 more people would have been killed. And the same number of other people, the killers, also would have had their lives ruined. And then there's their families and friends of the people on both sides of the crime as well. It's fair to say that over the last 30 years, tens of thousands of lives have been saved, both as victims and as perpetrators. And it's clear to me that the naysayers who claim that our city has reverted back to the bad old days do not care even one little bit about better police-community relations. But great street cops understand that a strong rapport with all the people we serve is absolutely vital to successful police work, and it keeps them safer. That's why another set of metrics is worth noting. While crime was falling, so too were arrests, police firearms use, and notably civilian complaints. There's a trend since 2010, although we are up 20% from last year. Compared to 10 years ago, arrests are down some 41%. We went from 47 police gun battles with adversaries in 2009 to 17 last year. Combined with the massive crime declines, this illustrates the positive equilibrium that's emerged between assertive enforcement and community connection. Now let's look beyond the numbers. Our most significant innovation of the past 5 years, neighborhood policing, is contributing greatly to our efforts to further reduce crime and disorder. Patrol officers have fostered strong relationships with the people who live and work in their neighborhoods, and they're jump-starting local crime investigations. They're swiftly gathering evidence that their community contacts are delivering a far higher quality of local criminal intelligence than ever before, which aids our great detectives. We're hitting crime from every single angle, from patrol to long-term investigations, in a coordinated strategy that has reduced violence to historically low levels, whether the cynics want to accept that truth or not. So how do we keep things going in the right direction? At the beginning of this year, now it's time for that sip of water, we identified 9 precincts where the violent crime rate was more than double the citywide average. Obviously, we're focusing more of our resources in those areas. But we've also immediately called a series of community meetings beginning in February. They were called by the NYPD, but they were led by people who live and work in those neighborhoods to discuss how our city can work together to make every neighborhood as safe as our safest neighborhood already is. And I'll tell you, some of the most insightful comments at those meetings came from young people. And all they need are programs and resources. They want the opportunity to live the best lives they can. They said that could be in the form of after-school activities, but also job training and hands-on learning of a truly practical nature. So I wonder, why don't we just get them what they want? Why don't we get them what they need? And I say we. I'm talking about all of us. You, me, every company, every city agency, every community-based organization, every elected official. We cannot allow this challenge to go unanswered, not when so many young lives are at stake. Together we must figure out a way to get between our youth and the lethal message emanating from the local gangs and crews and others who senselessly drive the violence in our city. According to some of our recent stats, there are more than 220 juveniles in New York City who have been arrested for felonies 8 or more times in the past 2 years. Think about that number. So who's waiting in the wings to join them? And why do we as a society allow this to happen? The NYPD is the preeminent crime-fighting organization in the world. We can be the preeminent prevention organization in the world, too. And the rest of New York City, in partnership with us, can show the world the way. At the NYPD, we have a long-standing tradition of focusing on our city's young people. The Police Athletic League, created 105 years ago, serves more than 30,000 New York City kids a year through various recreational, educational, cultural, and social activities. And Law Enforcement Exploring is a career-oriented program designed to educate and instill leadership and self-discipline. Each year, about 4,000 young people in New York City are enrolled as explorers and complete more than 110,000 hours of community service. And our Police Cadet Corps is a form of paid internship with the NYPD that's open to young people enrolled in a 4-year college. About 11 years ago, the City Council proposed eliminating the Cadet Corps in order to save roughly $1 million a year. Fortunately, that never occurred. We actually increased the number of cadets about 2 years ago from a little over 100 to close to 700 now. Thousands of city kids have since learned leadership skills and earned tuition assistance, and many of them went on to become police officers. In addition, the NYPD and the New York City Police Foundation are working on an innovative approach called Options. It's a virtual reality scenario-based training that has already provided more than 3,000 young people with decision-making skills based on emotional intelligence and de-escalation tactics. As we expand this program, we hope to connect the youth with life skills, career opportunities, and ultimately jobs. The Police Foundation has already identified companies that are providing information on existing jobs and the skills needed to land those jobs. And the police department was also able to give a little over 100 young people this past summer internships in the police department, so they get to see who the police department really is and who the people are that serve this great city. A lot of them stayed on as college aides too, so there are opportunities even within the NYPD. I'd like to thank Crown Castle, actually, a tech company, for taking a leadership role in this effort, and I ask all of you to consider how you can get involved when the Police Foundation reaches out to you also. The larger point is our mission to help the youth of New York City avoid crime has never been a side project. It's been long understood that this is what the NYPD does and this is what cops do. But we need a greater buy-in from the rest of New York City. It's about joining to help our city. When each of you arrived in this room this morning, you saw on your seats a large photo depicting the NYPD patch and a statue of a uniformed police officer and a child. You're probably sitting on that picture right now, but maybe if there's an empty seat, you can take a look at it. This larger-than-life bronze statue stands on a tall pedestal in our Hall of Heroes in the lobby of police headquarters. It was created in 1939 by noted Italian sculptor Attilio Piccirilli. And I practiced that, too, being an Irish guy. After Mayor LaGuardia advocated for a monument honoring NYPD officers killed in the line of duty. Incidentally, Piccirilli, along with his brothers, also carved the marble for the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The cop used as our model was Patrolman Martin Gillen of the 2-0 precinct, and the boy was actually Mayor LaGuardia's 9-year-old adopted son, Eric. Both made trips to Piccirilli's Bronx studio to pose and help produce what's become a metaphor for what the NYPD is doing today, 80 years later. The boy clings to the stoic cop as if seeking comfort. He clutches the officer's arm, seeming more vulnerable than scared. And that's what the sculpture represents. The NYPD protects the vulnerable. So to keep decreasing crime, we must keep looking for the future, to the future. And the future is our city's youth. They're just looking to be valued. Over and over in those 9 meetings, that's all I heard from these young people. We just want to be valued. We just want people to value us as they value other people in this city. And we want to have a chance to have a good future also. And that's throughout the city, in every borough, in every precinct, and in every neighborhood. The police are doing their part here. We have about 36,000 cops spread throughout the city. We have the same officers patrolling the same communities, building relationships each and every day. Through neighborhood policing, we have the delivery system. We just need the full and willing support of everyone here and everyone throughout the city. All of this is fully consistent with our overall mission of fighting crime and keeping people safe. But a huge part of fighting crime is preventing it in the first place. And we can do that. We can do that together by building trust and increasing opportunity for young people. We need to let young adults know that no matter where they grow up, they are valued, that we care about them, that we want them to have a good future, we want them to have a good life. And by leading that good life, that adds up to the good direction as our city continues to grow. It is now our goal to gain through partnership a new level of public support and public action that achieves our common mission of public safety. The clear message is this: we need every member of the public to help New York City. This is a shared responsibility. The police officers who are sworn to protect everyone who lives and works and visits here do so every day, courageously, conscientiously, and with a continuing sense of urgency. But we don't underestimate the difference even one other person or one corporation or one small business can make, and neither should you. So we see the task before us, and we see it as an opportunity. And we can capitalize on that opportunity as one unified city. Thank you very much. All right, the question moderator is coming up.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for being willing to, I guess let me start by saying we deeply appreciate how hard at ABNY, we deeply appreciate, one, how hard it is to be a police officer and how complicated the job is, and we recognize it's a lot different than the lives that most of us have on a day-to-day basis. So if the world, and I know we know it's complicated, if the world doesn't say thank you enough, on behalf of ABNY, I want to say thank you. We have time for some questions. Ma'am, right there.
proud to be partners with you on options. So the Grand Corporation is doing a study on police, neighborhood policing. Could you tell us a little bit about the metrics that RAND is looking into, and if at all the police is partnering with the RAND Corporation?
So we pivoted in May of 2015 with the way we police. And just to Steve's point before, you know, I've been in this business a long time. I was lucky enough to be a precinct commander. Now, you do hear about through social media and through traditional media that a lot of people don't appreciate the police and they disrespect them. I just want to say that from my experience, and I'm out in the communities every day, that's the majority of the people in this great city do have an appreciation for what we do. They might not hear it every day. Things have changed for police officers. You know, I came on in '83. I had a gun, a couple extra rounds. I had a radio that maybe worked, a nightstick. And look at what a police officer does today. Has a taser, has a body-worn camera, has a smartphone that gives them access to all sorts of information. It's a complicated job, but it's a job they continue to do for the right reason. So when you see a cop out there, if you have the opportunity, go up to him or her and tell them that you appreciate what they do, because they have changed this city. So with RAND Corporation, we asked them to come in and take a look at neighborhood policing. If we're going to change the way we do business, we have to make sure that we went down the right road. So they started this, September? They started this about 3 or 4 months ago, and they're looking at different metrics. Of course, they're going out, they're interviewing police officers to see how they feel about the change, and it's important that we do that. I know everybody in this room understands that there's been 9 active duty suicides in the police department this year, and we have to make sure our cops feel valued and respected. They're doing that. RAND is doing that in the community also. The biggest metric is crime. This is a crime fighting strategy, but we also have to look at 911 calls, 311 calls, backlogs, civilian complaints. There's a host of issues that we have to look at, and RAND is doing that for us. And at some point in the future, we'll be releasing a report publicly. Yep. Billy? I don't know, I'm not taking your job, Steve, am I? All right.
Commissioner, first of all, thank you, and the incredible job you and your team do day in, day out. In the 70s, my dad and uncle and several people involved with the Police Foundation back then, which was just getting going, funded the police vest. There was an officer shot, I think, in the Diamond District. And so that was an incredible moment. I'm being told now that there's new technology. There was a detective who was shot in friendly fire a few months ago, and that there's new technology that's possibly be deployed that will allow them to also have police, bulletproof vests. Can you talk about that, or is that top secret?
So every police officer is issued a bullet-resistant vest when they come out of the academy. And Billy's talking about Detective Brian Simonson that was killed out in the 102 back in February 12th. He was killed. There was a Sprint store. Somebody came in there with a gun, was in the process of committing a commercial robbery. The police responded, uniformed police from the 102. Brian and his partner, Sergeant Gore, responded also. And as the perp came out, he had the gun pointed towards the police, and they exchanged, well, they didn't exchange rounds, they fired at him thinking that their lives were in jeopardy. Turned out it was not a real gun, and Brian was killed by friendly fire. We, with the Police Foundation and the DEA, are in the process of purchasing vests that are slightly different for the detectives. If you look at it, it kind of looks like the windbreakers that we wear. It's tough for detectives to wear their vest the whole time they're at work, because a lot of times they're within the precinct and they run out immediately to respond to some jobs. So we have to make sure that we give them equipment that they're going to actually use. And this is a vest that you could slip on in a matter of seconds, and it's an important part of us keeping the members of this police department safe. So thanks, Billy, and thanks to the Police Foundation also. In the back.
Good morning, Commissioner. I got to be in the room for some of those violent crime reduction meetings, and I know how much it meant to the young people to get to have that FaceTime with you. and hear the things that they had to say. And out of that, there's come a lot of community-based solutions and thinking about how to source resources from other city agencies. But I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more about a project that's happening in East New York, the 127 Penn. It seems that you're making a capital investment, a resource investment. Can we just hear a little bit more
Sure.
about that? And is there ways that community-based organizations, corporations, and other city agencies could be involved to support that work and create greater public safety?
Yep. So 127 Penn is out in the 7-5 precinct in East New York. It's on the corner of Pennsylvania and Atlantic Avenue. It's one block down, actually. It was built as an old courthouse, and they used it as a PAL center a long time ago. We used it for applicant investigations. We took a look at that building. We took a look at the need in the 75th precinct for programs for young people. So we, with city money, rehabilitated that building, and it's a state-of-the-art youth center. Not only it's a community center. The community board is co-located with us. I just did a tour of it the other day. We did it with some media, and it's going to be a great addition to the young people of the 7-5. Our community affairs people will be working out of that office. It'll be a safe environment. There's a gym, there's a computer lab, there's a dance studio. There's so many different things. There's there's tutoring programs that are available. We contracted out running that to an NGO, to a non-governmental, community-based organization. So this is the first of its kind by the NYPD. I think that's an important statement to everybody in the city that we are willing to invest our money in the young people in this great city also. So I look forward to it being heavily used. I think it's opening up in a couple of weeks. Hopefully that doesn't get pushed back. And I know that young people in the 7-5 are really looking forward to it. Yep. Table 19's got a lot of questions.
Yes, we do.
All right.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Really appreciate your service. You mentioned the mission of fighting crime and keeping people safe. One thing you didn't talk about is street safety. And last year, 300 people were victims of homicide. There were 200 traffic fatalities. Wondering what more can be done. Have a few ideas. One is stepping up the number of officers who are trained to use radar. My understanding is it's a pretty low number right now. The second is expanding community outreach to include meeting with both pedestrian and cyclist groups, and also putting more cops on bikes, just as a way of seeing the experience. I ride my bike, and it's very dangerous out there.
I'll talk to Chief Chan, who runs our transportation bureau. I don't know the exact number of people that are trained in radar. I know each precinct has a traffic safety officer, and then we have the people in the citywide traffic task force, and we also have the men and women in the highway unit. But putting more cops out on bikes, we trained over 200 people in SRG. They're out every day now. You see them in Midtime, the strategic response group. Believe it or not, some of the best training I've ever received in the police department when I was the CO of the Central Park Precinct was the 5-day bike training. And it's a great way for our cops to establish those relationships, build in those relationships. Also a great way to keep in shape. I think they were looking to introduce some e-bikes, some pedal assist bikes for police officers. Not sure I want to go down that route. I'd like to see them some of them get in a little better shape. So, it's we're looking at that technology. We had last year 200. I think it was 200. You probably know this number better than I do. It's about 212 people killed in crashes, and we had 295 homicides. We also had, I don't think the number's finalized yet, about 1,600 people that died of opioid-related overdoses, which is 5-6 times the vehicle crash rate, and also 5 times the murder rate. So a lot of issues, but I'll take that up with Chief Chan. Thank you for that very much. Yep. Yep. Table 7. Yep.
Commissioner, thank you for your service to the people of New York. I represent the 31st Senatorial District, which includes Marble Hill, all of Inwood, Washington Heights, West Harlem, the Upper West Side, and I go down to the Chelsea area. And on National Night Out Against Crime, when I was going around to the various precincts and speaking, I talked about the NYPD continuous gun buyback program. And I have not heard about it publicly. And I do agree that some criminals will not be turning in their guns. but guns are in homes. And you know Jackie Rowe Adams,
Sure
and
do.
Cy, you know Jackie Rowe Adams, the founder of Harlem Mothers Save, where mothers have lost their children due to gun violence. I think that we should advertise that more so that people in their home that there's a gun, they can turn it in. Because the terminology, every gun off the street saves a life.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that NYPD, the commanding officers around, would advertise that more in the community. But then also, secondarily, I want to say that the community policing, I think that's working very well. The different sectors are having their meetings in their sectors, hearing from members of the community of what's going on, and then obviously taking that back to the precinct and the commanding officer in order to try to focus in on what they have to do. So I just appreciate that, but I want to see more of advertising that if anybody know where a gun is, let's get it off the street.
Yep. So to that point, we do work with the local DAs on gun buyback programs. I'm not sure when the last time we did one in Manhattan, but we'll revisit that. Well, we also took a hard look at domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence, and now we ask them when we go out and take complaint reports if there's a gun in the home. And we've been very successful in that regard as taking more guns off the street. So there are, as I said, 28,000 guns in the last, I think, 5 or 6 years. Think about that and how important it is that we keep these guns off the street. And the buyback programs, they do work. You know, it's one less gun around that could hurt somebody.
Can I ask you one final question?
Sure.
You mentioned there are 9 police precincts that are experiencing more violent crime than the rest of the city. And you mentioned they're tied to gangs. So 2 questions. Number one, gangs seem to have gone away for a while, but now are more popular. And I want to ask, is there a reason that gangs have come back? And second, if you were pointing at us towards being helpful in those 9 precincts in ways that we as ABNY can do things to improve the lives of those people, where should we start? What should we do?
Thanks, Steve. There's a couple of things that you can do. And I think, as I spoke about in my remarks, is helping young people is probably the most important thing, whether that's funding NGOs or CBOs, and getting the message out there that these programs are available, because the city has a number of programs through one of their departments for young people that they put a tremendous amount of money in it, but there doesn't seem to be one consolidated place where people can go and see how many programs are out there. I think just by helping young people get jobs and with job training, you know, even if it's just one job, even if it's a small business, if it's a big corporation, look at where you're hiring people from, especially young people, maybe summer jobs. We looked at that internally, and we made sure that we went to those 9 precincts, and that's where we got our interns for this summer, and we're going to keep building on that. So this is a program. It's more than a program. It's the way we're going to continue to keep driving crime down in New York City. As far as gangs and crews, they're usually responsible for about 30% of the homicides and shootings. That number keeps getting lower as far as total homicides and shootings, but the percentage of gangs and crews keeps going up too. And I think I know the cases that we do with Cy's office, the local DAs, and the Eastern and the Southern District, they're important. They're long-term cases, short-term cases, medium cases, where we go out there, we see who's involved in historical violence, and we'll do a case on them, take that down within 3 or 6 months, and make sure there's consequences for engaging in violent behavior.
Commissioner, thank you very much. We're grateful for your time.